I heard my own son's voice through the speaker, calm, careless, and cruel. "The old bat won't notice," he said as he took money from my drawer like it already belonged to him. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break, it woke up. Because what he didn't know was that I had already seen everything, every lie, every plan, every quiet step he thought I'd miss, and now I had proof. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special, and we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. My name is Margaret Whitmore. I am 71 years old, and I have lived in the same cedar-shingled house overlooking the Atlantic Ocean in Maine for nearly 4 decades. People often say a home is just wood and nails, but that has never been true for me. This house breathes with memory. It carries voices that no longer speak and footsteps that no longer echo, yet somehow still remain. Every morning, I wake before the sun fully rises. The light comes slowly here, stretching across the water like it is careful not to disturb anything. I make my coffee the same way I always have: 2 spoons of sugar, a small pour of cream stirred in silence. I take it to the window by the kitchen sink and stand there, watching the tide move in and out, steady and predictable. There is comfort in that kind of rhythm. My husband, Thomas, used to stand beside me in that same spot. He was a sea captain for most of his life, a man who understood the ocean better than he ever understood stillness. Even after he retired, he carried the sea with him in small ways, the way he folded maps, the way he checked the weather without thinking. It has been 4 years since he passed, but I still find traces of him everywhere. In the creak of the stairs, in the old compass he kept on the shelf, in the habit of leaving the porch light on just a little longer than necessary. After he was gone, the house changed, but not in the way people expect. It did not become empty. It became quiet in a deeper sense, like a held breath that never fully releases. I adjusted to it slowly. I kept my routines. I tended the small garden behind the house, trimming the same bushes he once insisted we plant. I spent afternoons volunteering at the town library, helping organize books and guiding visitors who wandered in looking for something they could not quite name. It gave my days structure. It reminded me that I was still part of something. For most of my life, I have trusted routine. It has a way of anchoring you when everything else shifts. That is why, when my son Ethan began visiting more often, I folded him into that routine without hesitation. At first, I was grateful. He had been going through a difficult time, something about a business that did not work out the way he had hoped. He did not speak about it in detail, and I did not press. Some disappointments settle better when left alone. He would arrive in the late afternoon, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with nothing but a tired expression and a quiet need to sit down. I would make tea, and we would talk about small things: the weather, the town, memories that felt safe to revisit. It felt, in those early days, like something steady had returned. His wife, Caroline, came with him more often as well. She was always polite, always composed, the kind of woman who smiled easily and spoke carefully. There was nothing I could point to that felt wrong, and yet there was something in the way her eyes moved through the room, noticing details, pausing just a fraction longer than necessary, that I could not quite ignore. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, that time and loss had made me more sensitive to things that did not matter. But then the questions began. Small at first, almost casual, about where I kept certain documents, about how I managed my accounts, about whether I had considered making things simpler. Simpler is a strange word. It sounds gentle, helpful even, but there is something hidden inside it, something that suggests reduction, removal, change. I answered them without thinking much of it. Why would I not? This was my son. This was family. And yet, as the days passed, I began to feel something I could not easily explain. The house, my house, started to feel different, not unfamiliar, not unsafe, but observed, as if something had shifted just slightly out of place. I have lived long enough to recognize when a feeling does not belong to fear, but to awareness. It does not shout. It does not panic. It simply stays, quiet and persistent, waiting for you to notice it. I noticed. And though I could not yet name what was changing, I understood one thing with certainty. Something had begun. If you're still watching and this beginning made you feel something shift, comment number 1 below so I know you're here with me. Now let's move into what really started to feel wrong. The first time I noticed it, I told myself it was nothing. I keep a small wooden box in the second drawer of my desk. It is not locked, never has been, because it never needed to be. Inside, I keep emergency cash, folded neatly in even stacks, arranged the same way every time. It is a habit I learned from my husband, Thomas. He used to say that if you respect your money, you always know where it stands. That morning, I opened the drawer without thinking, just as I had done countless times before. I was not even looking for anything in particular. It was simply part of my routine, a quiet check, a small reassurance. But when I lifted the lid of the box and looked inside, something felt off. Not dramatically, not in a way that would alarm anyone else, just enough. I paused, my fingers resting on the edge of the box, and looked more carefully. The stacks were still there, still neat, still in place, but one of them was thinner than it should have been. I counted it once, then again. The number did not change. For a moment, I stood there trying to retrace my steps. Had I taken some out recently? Had I moved it somewhere else? I searched my memory carefully, not rushing, not assuming. I have always trusted my mind because it has never given me a reason not to. Still, I told myself there had to be an explanation. Small things can slip. Even the most careful habits are not perfect. So I closed the box, returned it to the drawer, and let it go. Or at least I tried to. A few days later, I sat at the kitchen table with my bank statement spread out in front of me. It had arrived in the mail that morning, folded neatly inside its envelope like it always did. I opened it slowly, sipping my coffee as I scanned the lines. That was when I saw it. A withdrawal I did not recognize. It was not a large amount, nothing that would immediately raise concern for most people, but it was not familiar. The date did not align with any of my usual expenses. The location listed was not somewhere I had been. I read it again, more carefully this time. Then a third time. The numbers stayed the same. I leaned back slightly in my chair, letting the paper rest in my hands. Once again, I searched for a reasonable explanation. Perhaps I had forgotten. Perhaps I had made a purchase and not noted it. That happens sometimes, I told myself. But even as I thought it, something inside me resisted the idea. Later that afternoon, Ethan stopped by. He walked in with the same casual ease he always had, setting his keys down on the counter like nothing in the world had changed. We spoke briefly about ordinary things, the weather, a neighbor who had repainted their fence. It all felt familiar on the surface. Then, Almost without warning, he asked, "Have you been keeping track of everything okay?" The question was gentle. It was phrased with concern, but there was something underneath it that did not sit right with me. "I always have," I replied. He nodded, too quickly, as if the answer did not matter as much as the reaction. Caroline arrived shortly after, her presence filling the room with a kind of careful brightness. She offered to help me organize some papers, already moving toward my desk before I had fully answered. "I just think it might make things easier," she said. Easier. That word again. I watched her as she opened drawers, her movements smooth, confident, just a little too familiar for someone handling things that were not hers. I said nothing. I simply observed. At one point, I mentioned the missing cash, not directly, not accusingly, just in passing. For a brief second, Ethan and Caroline looked at each other. It was quick, so quick that anyone else might have missed it, but I did not. That look was not confusion. It was recognition. I felt something settle quietly inside me then. Not fear, not anger, clarity. Because the missing money, the unfamiliar transaction, the questions about my memory, they were no longer separate things. They were connected. I did not confront them. Not yet. Instead, I listened. I watched. I paid attention in a way I had not needed to before. There is a difference between imagining something and knowing something without proof. It is a quiet difference, but it matters. By the time they left that evening, the house felt the same as it always had, and completely different. I stood alone in the kitchen for a long moment, my hand resting on the back of the chair, my thoughts moving slowly, deliberately. I did not have answers yet, but I was no longer asking the wrong questions. If you're still watching and you're starting to sense the tension building, comment number 2 below to stay with me. Now, let's see how the truth began to reveal itself. By the time the feeling settled into something I could no longer ignore, it had already changed shape. It was no longer uncertainty. It was direction. I had spent days moving through my routines as if nothing had shifted, but inside, something had. I was paying attention in a way I had not needed to before. Every sound, every question, every glance carried weight. And still, I told myself I needed to be sure. The camera was not meant for my son. That is something I remind myself even now. I installed it weeks earlier, after a night when I thought I heard movement in the house. It was a precaution, nothing more. A small device tucked behind the glass panel of a cabinet in the living room, angled toward the desk where I kept the wooden box. It was quiet, invisible, easy to forget. For several days, it showed me nothing, just my own life, played back in fragments, me walking from room to room, me standing at the window with my coffee, me sitting in the evening, still and silent, watching the light fade. Ordinary things, safe things. Then one afternoon, without any clear reason, I opened the application again. I scrolled through the recording slowly, not searching for anything specific, just following a feeling I could not explain. Most of the clips were the same as before. Stillness, routine, nothing. Until one of them was not. I tapped it. The image steadied, and there they were, Ethan and Caroline, standing in my living room, alone. They moved differently when they thought no one was watching. Relaxed, unguarded. There was no careful tone, no softened expressions, just ease. Ethan walked toward the desk without hesitation, not looking around, not pausing. He reached for the drawer and pulled it open with the kind of familiarity that comes from repetition. My breath slowed. He took out the wooden box. For a moment, I could not feel my hands. He opened it. The movement was smooth, practiced. There was no uncertainty in it, no sign that he questioned what he was doing. He simply lifted the lid and looked inside. Then he began to count. The sound was quiet but unmistakable. Paper against paper, measured, deliberate, each bill passing through his fingers like it belonged there. Caroline stood behind him, watching. "How much is that?" she asked. "Not enough," he replied, his voice flat, almost bored. He counted a little more, then paused. And then, without hesitation, without thought, he said it. "The old bat will not notice." The words did not land all at once. They moved slowly, like something heavy sinking through water, until they reached a place inside me I did not know how to protect. I did not move. I did not react. I simply watched. Caroline did not object. She did not question him. She stepped closer, leaning slightly as if trying to see better, as if this was a shared task, something normal. "We need more than this," she said. "I know," Ethan answered. "I will figure it out." There was no urgency in his voice, no fear, just certainty. He placed some of the money aside, folded it neatly, and slipped it into his pocket. Then he closed the box and returned it to the drawer with care, almost as if that detail mattered, as if neatness could replace respect. The clip ended a few moments later. I did not realize how long I had been sitting there until my hand began to ache from holding the phone too tightly. The room around me felt unchanged, and yet nothing was the same. I watched the recording again and again. Each time I looked for something different, a hesitation, a second thought, a flicker of doubt in his expression. There was none. What I saw was not confusion. It was not desperation. It was comfort. That was the part that stayed with me. Comfort. By the time I set the phone down, I was no longer searching for explanations. I was no longer trying to fit what I had seen into something I could accept. I knew what it was, and more importantly, I knew what it was not. It was not a mistake. It was not an accident. It was not the son I had believed I understood. I sat there in the quiet, the sound of the ocean faint through the walls, steady and unchanged. For the first time in a long while, I did not feel uncertain. I felt clear. Because whatever this was, whatever had been happening in my home, I was no longer guessing. I had seen it. And that changed everything. If you're still watching and that moment raised questions in your mind, comment number 3 below so I know you're paying attention. Now, let's move into what changed everything. I thought the truth would break something inside me. I expected it to come loudly, to unravel everything I had believed in a way that left me unsteady, unsure of where to stand. But it did not happen like that. It arrived quietly, settled into place and then everything became still. That was what surprised me most. Stillness. The night after I watched the recording, I did not cry. I did not pace the house, or call anyone, or search for comfort. I sat in the same chair by the window and let the silence remain exactly as it was. The ocean moved in the distance, steady and unchanged, and I found myself matching that rhythm without thinking. By morning, something inside me had shifted, not in the way people describe strength, not as something loud or defiant. It was quieter than that. It was clarity. I understood, without needing to say it out loud, that confronting Ethan would solve nothing. Not yet. If I walked into a conversation with only what I had seen, he would deny it. He would reshape it into something smaller, something harmless, something that could be explained away. And I would lose the only advantage I had. So I chose silence. Not the kind that comes from fear, but the kind that comes from intention. That morning, I took out an old notebook from the back of my closet. It was one I had not used in years, the pages still clean, waiting. I sat at the dining table and began to write. Dates, amounts, small details that might have seemed insignificant before. I wrote down the missing cash, the unfamiliar transaction, the way Ethan's questions had changed, the look he and Caroline exchanged when I mentioned something out of place. I did not rush. I did not guess. I only wrote what I knew. By the time I closed the notebook, I no longer felt like I was trying to understand what was happening. I was documenting it. Later that afternoon, I called Helen Brooks. She had handled my husband's estate years ago, and I remembered her as someone who did not waste words. When she answered, I did not ease into the conversation. I told her exactly what I had seen, exactly what I suspected. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a pause. Then she said, "You need more than one moment." I understood immediately. One recording could be explained. A pattern could not. After the call, I went back to the desk. I opened the drawer and looked at the wooden box again, but this time, I was not searching for what was missing. I was looking at what remained, not just the money, but the structure, the habit, the order that had always been there. That was when I realized something else. This had not started yesterday. I pulled out a folder of documents and began to review them carefully. Pages I had signed months ago, forms Ethan had placed in front of me with simple explanations. At the time, I had trusted him enough not to question every line. Now I read them differently. Slower, closer. There were small things that did not sit right. A signature that felt rushed. Language that was broader than I remembered. Nothing obvious, nothing that would stand out at first glance, but enough. Enough to suggest this had been building for some time. That evening when Ethan came by, I greeted him the same way I always had. I made tea. I asked about his day. I let the conversation move naturally, but I watched. I noticed how quickly his eyes moved toward the desk. I noticed how easily he filled silences with questions about what I had done that day, where I had been, what I had handled. So I gave him something new. I hesitated, just slightly. When he asked about a bill, I paused before answering. When I reached for my keys, I pretended to search for them longer than necessary. Small things, controlled things. His reaction was immediate. Concern, at first. Then something else. Relief. It was subtle, but I saw it. The way his shoulders loosened. The way his tone softened. Not out of care, but out of confirmation. Caroline arrived later, her movements already more familiar than they should have been. She stepped into my space without waiting, her hands moving across surfaces as if they belonged there. I said nothing. I let her. Because every moment they believed I was unaware, they became less careful. And every moment they became less careful, I saw more. That night, I watched the footage again, not with shock this time, with focus. I began to notice patterns, when they came together, when they acted, how they spoke when they thought no one was listening. This was no longer about discovery. It was about preparation, because whatever they believed they were doing, whatever plan they thought they were building, they were not the only ones moving forward. I was no longer behind them. I was watching them, and I was learning. If you're still watching and you can feel the situation getting deeper and more unsettling, comment number 4 below to keep going with me. Now, let's step into the turning point. By the time I opened the footage that evening, I was no longer searching for surprises. I was searching for patterns. The difference matters. When you expect something, you stop reacting to it and start understanding it. That was where I had arrived. Not calm, Not comfortable, but clear. I sat in the same chair, the room dim except for the soft glow of the screen in my hand. The ocean moved beyond the walls, steady as ever. But inside, everything felt sharpened. I scrolled through the recordings with purpose. Dates, times, movement. I had begun to notice when they came together, when they acted, how long they stayed, what they did before and after. It was no longer random. It followed a rhythm. Then I found the clip. I knew it was different before I even pressed it. They were both there again, standing in the living room. But something about their posture had changed. There was tension between them this time, not the quiet coordination I had seen before. Caroline stood near the window, her arms crossed, her body angled slightly away, as if she had been pacing. "This is not enough," she said. Her voice was lower than usual, but sharper. Ethan leaned against the desk, his hand resting on the edge, his expression tight. "We have to be careful," he replied. "Careful, not right, not wrong, careful." Caroline shook her head slightly. "Careful is not fixing anything," she said. "We are barely making progress." Progress. The word settled heavily. Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair in a way I recognized from years ago when he was trying to solve something that did not have an easy answer. But there was something different now. The hesitation was not about whether he should do something. It was about how. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. That was the moment everything shifted. Caroline did not answer immediately. She stepped closer, her voice lowering further, controlled, deliberate. "We need something more permanent," she said. Permanent. I felt my fingers tighten slightly around the phone. Ethan frowned, not in disagreement, but in calculation. "What does that even mean?" he asked. Caroline tilted her head just slightly, as if choosing her words carefully. "If she cannot manage things anymore," she said, "we would not have to keep doing this piece by piece." The room on the screen seemed to go still. So did I. Ethan did not respond right away. He looked down, thinking, not recoiling, not rejecting, just processing. "How would we prove that?" he asked. The question was quiet, but it carried more weight than anything else. Caroline's expression softened, but not with kindness, with strategy. "We do not have to prove everything," she said. "We just need to raise enough concern." Concern. Such a gentle word for something so precise. I sat back slowly, my breath steady, my thoughts aligning in a way they had not before. The missing money, the questions about my memory, the documents, the way they watched me when they thought I was not paying attention. It all fit. This was not about small amounts of cash. It was not about moments of opportunity. This was a plan to take control without force, to make it look necessary, to make it sound like care. Ethan nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly. "She trusts me," he said. Caroline's lips curved faintly. "Exactly," she replied. That word echoed longer than anything else. Trust. I felt something settle inside me then, not breaking, not collapsing, but locking into place. There was no space left for doubt, no room for misunderstanding. This was not something that would stop. This was something that would grow. I watched the rest of the clip without moving, without reacting. Their voices continued, softer now, details I did not need to hear to understand the direction they were heading. By the time it ended, I no longer felt the need to replay it. I had seen enough, more than enough. I set the phone down slowly and looked around the room, at the walls that had held my life for so many years, at the quiet that had once felt safe. Nothing had changed. And everything had, because now I understood the full shape of it, not just what they were doing, but what they were preparing to do next. And that understanding left me with only one truth. This would not end on its own. By the time I woke the next morning, there was no confusion left. What I had seen, what I had heard, it no longer moved inside me as shock or disbelief. It had settled into something steadier, something that did not ask questions. I understood the situation clearly, and because of that, I understood something else just as clearly. I could not afford to react the way they expected me to. If I confronted Ethan now, everything would shift. He would deny it, soften it, reshape it into something I could not prove. The plan they were building would not stop. It would simply move faster, deeper, harder to see. So I made a choice, not to confront, to prepare. The first step was not emotional. It was practical. That same morning, I called a medical clinic in town and scheduled a full cognitive evaluation. I did not hesitate when I spoke. I did not explain more than necessary. I simply set the appointment. The clinic was quiet when I arrived, the kind of quiet that feels structured rather than empty. The doctor greeted me professionally, without assumption, without concern. That mattered. We spoke first, simple questions, direct ones. How was I feeling? How I managed my daily routines? Whether I handled my own finances? I answered each one calmly, clearly, without rushing. Then came the assessments: memory recall, pattern recognition, problem solving. I took my time with each task, not because I needed it, but because I understood what this moment represented. This was not about proving speed. It was about proving presence. When it was finished, the doctor reviewed his notes for a moment before looking up. "You are doing very well," he said. "There are no signs of cognitive impairment." The words were simple, but they carried weight. I thanked him, stood, and left without needing to say anything more. Outside, the air felt sharper, clearer. Independence is a quiet thing. You do not notice it when you have it. Only when someone tries to take it away do you understand its full shape. That afternoon, I called Helen Brooks. "I have documentation," I told her. She did not sound surprised. "Good," she said. "That changes everything." She explained that if Ethan attempted anything legally, this would stand as direct evidence against it. She also confirmed what I already suspected. "He is likely exploring his options," she said. I was not unsettled by that. I was ready for it. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Lily. "Are you home?" There was something in the simplicity of it that felt different. I told her yes. She arrived not long after, stepping inside quietly, her eyes moving through the room as if she was searching for something she could not name. We sat together without speaking at first. Then she said, "Things at home are not normal." I listened. She spoke carefully, choosing her words with more awareness than someone her age should have to. Arguments, tension, conversations that stopped when she entered the room. And then, more quietly, "They talk about you." I did not interrupt. I did not correct her. I let her continue, because in that moment, I understood something important. I was not the only one who could see it. When she finished, she looked at me, uncertain, waiting, so I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. "You are not wrong," I said. It was not everything, but it was enough. After she left, I sat alone in the quiet again, but this time it felt different. Not heavy, not uncertain. Resolved, because now I had what I needed: proof, awareness, and time. I was no longer trying to understand what they were doing. I was preparing for what came next. If you're still watching and you feel how serious this has become, Comment number 6 below, so I know you're still here. Now, let's move into chapter 7, where everything starts to escalate. The change in Ethan did not happen all at once. It arrived in small adjustments, almost invisible if you were not paying attention. But I was. He no longer came by just to sit and talk. There was always a direction to his visits now, a quiet purpose beneath his words. Conversations that once drifted easily began to narrow, guided towards something specific. One afternoon, as we sat in the living room, he glanced around the house in a way that felt measured. "This place is a lot to keep up with," he said. The words were gentle, almost thoughtful, but they did not land that way. I followed his gaze, taking in the walls, the furniture, the small details that had never once felt like a burden to me. "I manage," I replied. He nodded, but there was a pause, as if he was deciding how far to go. "I just mean," he continued, "it might not always be this easy." There it was, not a suggestion, a direction. I let the silence stretch before answering, just enough to seem uncertain. "Maybe," I said softly. That was all he needed. Over the next few days, the idea returned in different forms, not directly repeated, but always present. A comment about maintenance, a remark about safety, a passing reference to how things might change in the future. Caroline carried it further. She began mentioning places, not as recommendations, but as possibilities. Quiet communities, comfortable spaces, people around who could help. Her tone was always warm, always careful, but beneath it, there was structure, a pattern of repetition designed to make the idea feel familiar, natural. I listened. I nodded when it made sense to nod. I hesitated when it was useful to hesitate. I never pushed back far enough to create resistance. And slowly, I watched the shift happen. They stopped testing. They started assuming. Caroline moved through the house more freely now. She opened drawers without asking, handled papers as if they belonged to her, adjusted things that had never needed adjusting. Her confidence was quiet, but unmistakable. Ethan followed the same pattern, though less openly. His words changed before his actions did. He began speaking about the future as if it had already been decided. "When things get harder," he said one evening, not looking at me directly, "we should already have a plan in place." We should. Not you, not I. We. I felt the weight of that word settle in the room. Still, I did not challenge him. Because every moment they believed I was uncertain, they revealed more. That night, I watched the footage again. They were more relaxed now, less careful, their movements quicker, their conversations less guarded. The pattern had not just continued, it had intensified. And that told me something important. They believed they were close to what exactly I was not entirely sure, but I could feel it approaching, like a tide that had already begun to turn. I stood in the living room for a long moment after the video ended, my eyes moving across the space that had held my life for so many years. This house was not just a place. It was memory. It was choice. It was mine. And they were already trying to take it. Not by force, but by making it seem like it no longer belonged to me. I understood then that the situation had changed. This was no longer quiet planning. It was movement. And movement, once it begins, does not stop on its own. Which meant one thing. I could not wait much longer. By the time I made the call, I already knew how it would unfold. There was no hesitation left, no uncertainty to slow me down. Everything I had seen, everything I had gathered, had led to this point. Waiting longer would not protect me. It would only give them more time. So I chose the moment myself. I called Ethan that afternoon. My voice was steady, warm in the way it had always been. I told him I was making dinner on Sunday. I mentioned his father, the meals we used to share, the kind of details that sit comfortably in memory. He agreed quickly, too quickly. That told me everything I needed to know. After the call, I stood in the kitchen for a while, my hands resting lightly against the counter. It was quiet, but not empty. It felt structured, deliberate, as if the house itself understood what was coming. I reached out to Helen next. I asked her to be present, but not at the table. She understood immediately. There was no need for explanation. Then I called Frank, the one person I trusted to remain steady when things shifted. He did not ask questions. He simply said he would be there. I invited Pastor Reynolds as well, not for confrontation, but for witness. Some truths carry more weight when they are seen by others who understand their meaning. Lily was the teat. I hesitated only for a moment before asking her to come. She deserved to see what was real, not what had been shaped for her. The house changed as I prepared it. I cleaned, arranged, set the table with the same care I always had, placing each piece exactly where it belonged. Plates aligned, glasses steady, silverware precise. It looked like any other dinner. That was the point. I reviewed everything once more. The recordings, the notes, the documents. Each piece placed where I could reach it without hesitation. Before the evening began, I checked the camera again. It was still there, still watching, just as it had been from the beginning. By the time the first knock came at the door, I was ready. Not because I hoped for anything, but because I had removed the need to. If you're still watching and you're ready to see how this all ends, comment number 8 below, so I know you're with me. Now, let's move into the final outcome of the story. Dinner unfolded the way it always had. Plates passed from hand to hand. Glasses caught the soft light above the table. Conversation moved easily across familiar ground, careful and polite. Anyone looking in from the outside would have seen nothing unusual, but I was not outside. I watched everything. Ethan sat comfortably, his posture relaxed, his voice steady. Caroline smiled at the right moments, adding small comments that kept the rhythm of the evening intact. They moved through it without hesitation, without suspicion. They believed this was just another dinner. Lily was quieter. She listened more than she spoke, her eyes shifting between faces, taking in details that others might have missed. Frank remained composed, his presence steady. Pastor Reynolds spoke gently, keeping the conversation grounded. I let it continue. I let them settle into it. Then, halfway through the meal, I placed my fork down. The sound was soft, but it carried. I asked everyone here for a reason, I said. The room changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. Ethan straightened slightly. Caroline's smile paused, just for a moment. Lily looked at me. I reached for my phone. There is something you need to hear. I pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room. Clear, undeniable. The old bat will not notice. Silence followed. Heavy, complete. No one moved. I watched them, instead of reacting. The way Ethan's expression shifted, the way Caroline's composure tightened, the way Lily's hand stilled against the table. That is not what it sounds like, Ethan said finally. I looked at him. What does it sound like? I asked. He did not answer. I played another clip. No words this time, just movement. The drawer, the money. His hands. Caroline spoke then, sharper, defensive. This is being twisted. I did not raise my voice. It is not, I said. Then I played the last recording. Her voice, his response. the plan. The room fractured. They turned on each other, words quick, uneven, searching for distance from what had been shared. Lily's voice broke the space between them. Why? No one answered. Helen stepped forward then, calm and precise. She explained what would happen next, not as a threat but as fact. Ethan looked at me, not angry, not yet, just stunned. You are serious, he said. Yes, I replied. That was all. He stood. Caroline followed. The door closed behind them, and just like that, the truth remained. The house felt different the next morning. Not quieter, not emptier, just honest. I moved through each room the way I always had, but without that quiet weight that had followed me for weeks. There were no second guesses, no questions waiting in the corners. Everything was exactly what it was. I made my coffee and stood by the window, watching the light settle across the yard. The world had not changed. I had. Lily came by later, this time without hesitation. She stepped inside like she belonged, and in a way, she did. We sat together in the kitchen, not saying much at first. Are they going to be okay? She asked. I understood what she meant. They will have to face what they have done, I said. That does not mean they will not be okay. She nodded, quiet, thoughtful. I do not want to hate them, she said. You do not have to, I told her. You just have to be clear about what is right. That was enough. In the days that followed, things moved forward. Helen handled the legal steps carefully. My accounts were secure. Everything that needed to be documented was documented. Ethan tried to reach out. I did not answer. Not because I did not care, but because I finally understood something I had missed before. Love does not require access. One afternoon, I sat down with Helen and updated my will. Some things changed. Some things stayed the same. It was not about punishment. It was about clarity. Later, I stood in the living room, the same place where everything had been revealed. It no longer felt heavy. It felt steady. Because in the end, nothing was taken from me that I was not willing to protect. And this time, I had chosen to protect myself. What breaks us rarely does so all at once. More often, it happens quietly. In small moments we try to explain away. In instincts we choose to ignore. Trust does not collapse in a single instant. It erodes slowly until one day the truth stands where comfort used to be. And in that moment, there is a choice: to turn away and preserve illusion, or to face it and reclaim yourself. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet decision to see clearly, to set boundaries, and to stand firm even when it hurts. Because self-respect is not given by others, it is protected from within. If this story resonated with you, thank you for staying until the end. Feel free to share your thoughts, your experiences, or where you are watching from. And if you want more stories like this, consider following and subscribing.